Hello everyone, I'm Tim Pearson and welcome to the United States Wrestling Officials Association Referee Webinar Program. In today's webinar, we're going to discuss some basic UWW terminology and vocabulary. Now, UWW has provided us with a basic terminology and vocabulary so that regardless what our native language is, English, German, Ukrainian, Japanese, etc., by properly using UWW terminology and vocabulary, we will be able to effectively communicate with each other during the conduct of a bout. So let's take a look at some of the basic UWW terms and vocabulary that we need to be familiar with as referees. Within freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling, the wrestlers are going to be in one of two states of being. They're going to be in the standing position or they're going to be in the parterre position. Now, the standing position is, well, very self-explanatory. The wrestlers are in a vertical upright position on their feet. And we can see in our picture to the right, Andy Bisick is showing us what the standing position looks like. He's standing on the attack. Very self-explanatory and hopefully easy to understand. The parterre position is where the defensive wrestler is on his or her knees on the mat. So as we look, we can see our blue wrestler is on her knees on the mat. Now she has achieved the parterre position. Now, one key note here is you do not need control to achieve the parterre position. When the knees go down, whether the offensive wrestler is in a dominant position or out in front, like we have here with the red wrestler is securing a front headlock and does not have control, we still have achieved the parterre position due to blue being on the mat with her knees. Our next position is the initial position. What is the initial position? Well, simply stated, the defensive wrestler has his or her chest facing the mat in parterre. Now, the initial position is often confused with the American folk style defendable position. When an action occurs, the offensive wrestler must bring the defensive wrestler back to the initial position of the attack before a second action will be counted and scored. Becoming defendable during the attack for a secondary attack is not part of freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling. So if we take a look at our picture to the right, we see that red is in the initial position, chest down, facing the mat in parterre. Blue has a trapped arm gut and is going to take him to the left. All right. Now, as blue starts the turn and completes the turn, blue must bring red back to this position here for a second before a second turn happens. Okay, that is the key of bringing the wrestler back, the defensive wrestler back to the initial position. Now, I will submit to you that at no time during this turn, 1, 2, or 3, if he turns, comes back to the initial, comes back to the initial, comes back to the initial, I've scored 3 turns there. At no time during these turns has red ever become defendable. But the key point here is red always came back to the initial position of the attack for a secondary attack to begin and be counted for blue. So that's the key on the initial position. It's not defendable. It's bringing the wrestler back to the initial position of the attack for a secondary attack to occur, be counted, and scored. Next is the danger position. Danger position is very simply the shoulders form an angle less than 90 degrees to the mat. The head, elbow, shoulders are touching the mat. So on our picture here, we see our wrestler, our blue wrestler getting turned. So if we draw a line straight down through his body here, as he is getting turned this way, once he goes to 89 degrees, he breaks that 90 in here, he has lost 2 points to red. Okay, that's very simply, it's all geometry, essentially, is breaking 90 degrees, your back, shoulders breaking 90 degrees with your elbow, and our elbow is down here, shoulder or head on the mat, breaking 90 degrees. We have the danger position. Next is risk. What is risk? Well, risk permeates our entire sport, especially when we're in the evaluation of awarding or not awarding points based on risk. And risk is, very simply, a wrestler is willing to expose themselves to the possible loss of a position or points during a legitimate attempt to score. So as we look at our picture here to the right, we can see that red he is exercising a lot of risk. He is taking a lot of risk in the conduct of this throw, because blue can cycle the action, potentially cycle the action. He can potentially have a counteraction and trapping red in danger when he hits. Red is taking a lot of risk in this throw. So that is one term that we need to be very familiar with. And later on in a separate webinar, we will discuss risk in much more detail and in greater length. Now we're going to discuss some basic UWW vocabulary. But first, I want to preface, when you're addressing a wrestler, use their color first, then give your command. It'll make your command more effective than just giving an open-ended command with no color attached to it. For example, action. Who are you talking to? No one knows. Coaches, athletes, and your referee team don't know who you're talking to. But conversely, when you say blue, action, everyone knows you are talking to blue and you are telling blue you want more action. So what is action? Action is our way of informing the wrestler that we want them to wrestle more aggressively. We want them to improve their position, and we want them to attempt more scoring or offensive actions. Contact. Contact can be used in one of three ways. The first way is in the ordered parterre position. We get the bottom wrestler set. We bring the top wrestler in. We tell the top wrestler contact. We want them to place their hands on the back of their opponent before we blow the whistle. In Greco, when we use the word contact in the standing position, we want them to assume a body-to-body contact. We want them grabbing hold of each other. And we use contact when the wrestlers are failing to engage holds. They're avoiding each other. It's hard to score when you're not in contact. You're not grabbing hold of each other. So that we have one of three ways we can use the word contact. Open. This is our way of telling a wrestler, it's our word of telling the wrestler, they must alter their position. They need to open up. They're closed off. They're not letting their opponent in to take a hold, and we want them to open up. Continue. Now, we use continue when the wrestlers have stopped due to some sort of confusion. A whistle on the adjacent mat goes off, and the wrestlers on my mat stop, and they're confused. This is where you want to look at the wrestlers and say continue. Now, when you do that, make sure the wrestlers are in a safe position, that you don't have one wrestler barreling down on the other one. If it's safe and you can just continue without having to blow the whistle to stop it, continue, and they'll go right back to wrestling. If a wrestler has a good lock and they are working to a potential scoring position and it is very slow in developing, you can tell them continue. Continue. You're giving a verbal indication that continue your action because you're going to let this situation develop. Up. Up is when you have stopped the bout in the parterre position and you're going to restart the bout in the standing position. Center. Center, you're telling the wrestlers to either move away from the protection area and work their way back to the center, or you're going to blow the whistle, stop the bout, and tell the wrestlers to go back to the center. Now, when the wrestlers are down in parterre, for me, I'll blow the whistle, stopping the bout, signify up, center. I'm telling the wrestlers to stand up and move to the center. Our next command in our UWW vocabulary is zone. When we use the command blue zone, red zone, we're informing the wrestlers that they are leaving the central wrestling area into the zone or orange area, and they're getting very close to the protection area. By us giving the command zone, we are telling them to leave the zone and work yourself back to the central wrestling area and continue the bout. The command place. Just like in standing position, we're using the term zone. In place, the wrestlers are in the parterre position, and the defensive wrestler is working themselves towards the protection area. We want to assume a position out in the protection area facing the wrestlers, and we want to have our hand out like a traffic cop saying stop, and we want to say blue, place, red, place. By us using the command place, we are telling the defensive wrestler to stay on the wrestling mat, don't go into the protection area, and defend your position. By our position right here, if the defensive wrestler decides to not heed our command and continue into the protection area, then we have a very simple fleeing the mat call. Head up. Head up is going to be used predominantly in Greco-Roman, where the defensive wrestler or defending wrestler will drop their head and put their crown of their head in the chest of the offensive or attacking wrestler or in the shoulder, some type of blocking action using the head, lowering the head and using it. We want that head up. So blue, head up, red, head up. By having the head up, then both wrestlers can get a body-to-body contact, and therefore we can get some throws, hopefully some offensive actions and throws out of it. Not so much in freestyle. Freestyle, just to the nature of freestyle sport, the heads are going to come down. They're going to use their heads in their tie-ups and in their attacks. So using the head up in freestyle, not so much, but definitely we'll be using head up in Greco-Roman. No fingers. This is our way of telling the wrestlers to stop grabbing or interlocking the fingers. You're going to see this a lot. The first thing those wrestlers want to do is interlock those fingers and grab hand to hand. Once they do that, nothing else is going to happen after that. So we as referees need to prevent that or try to stop that from happening by blue, no fingers, red, no fingers. Stop grabbing or interlocking those fingers. The last thing we want to do is get into a negative wrestling situation, or worse, a brutality situation with grabbing the fingers, that we are not discouraging that type of negative behavior from occurring. So that is our way of telling the wrestlers, knock it off. Stop grabbing or interlocking fingers. Blue, no fingers. Next is no block. Okay, this is what we're going to tell a wrestler when they're using their hands, their arms, and we talked about the head already, but using the head of getting inside and blocking an offensive activity, hands on the chest, hand up in the armpit, grabbing the pectoral muscle, blocking the offensive wrestler's activity so they cannot continue their attack. By using the term blue, no block, red, no block, we're telling them that you need to change your defensive tactics. Okay, because you're not defending, you're blocking. Big difference between the two. And finally, if the wrestlers are not heeding your commands or appreciating your warnings, and they're not adjusting the behavior, their negative behavior that you're trying to correct, then you can go to a formal warning or an attention. This is where you would stop the bout, and you're going to look at the wrestler, and you're going to say blue. Attention, head up. When you give them a formal attention, you are telling them this is a formal warning of an illegal action, and the next time it's going to be a penalty, i.e. a caution in 1 or a caution in 2. So you can give them friendly warnings of blue, head up, red, no fingers, blue, no block. If they don't want to listen and they continually do it, you can stop the bout, give them a formal blue, attention, no fingers, no block, head up, something that has been negative that they have not corrected, and that, like I say, next time there's going to be a penalty. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this webinar on basic UWW terminology and vocabulary. The vocabulary and terminology that was provided to us by UWW, again, is a means for us, regardless of what language you speak. We all speak UWW language when we're on the mat, and that's what makes our communication very effective and our referee teams very cohesive, because of all our effective communication through our terminology and our basic vocabulary. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you have a good day.